It's Friday night in Indianapolis. Gainsbridge Fieldhouse is loud. The cameras are still rolling, and the broadcast is still live when the microphone catches something it wasn't supposed to. A veteran player, Tiffany Hayes, turns to Caitlin Clark, 24 years old, the most talked about name in women's basketball, and tells her to get her face out of hers. The words hit the broadcast. The network bleeps it. The clip is already uploading before the final buzzer sounds. Final score 90-82. Indiana wins. And none of that matters as much as what happens next. Because the head coach of the Indiana Fever, the woman hired specifically to lead this team, the woman whose entire job description revolves around managing and protecting a generational talent, walks to the post-game podium. The cameras are pointed at her. The microphones are live. The entire sports world is waiting. And Stephanie White says absolutely nothing about it. Not one word, not one sentence, not one acknowledgement that her star player had just been threatened on national television. And that silence, that very specific, very deliberate silence, is what this story is actually about. Because this wasn't a one-time slip. This wasn't nerves at a podium or a coach who forgot to address something in the chaos of a post-game press conference. This was the third time. 3 games, 3 media windows, 3 opportunities to stand in front of a microphone and say the name of the player her franchise was built around. And 3 times, Stephanie White found something else to talk about instead. When you start connecting those dots, the picture that forms isn't flattering. And with Chase Center 3 nights away, with Tiffany Hayes heading home to San Francisco, with a crowd that will be roaring behind her, with a foul count that's already circulating on social media that doesn't look good for the officials or for Clark, the clock is running, and Indianapolis is still waiting on one sentence from the woman who runs the bench. Let's start at the beginning of Friday night, because the sequence of events matters more than the headline. Gainsbridge Fieldhouse, Indiana Fever versus the Golden State Valkyries. By the third quarter, the game has already gotten physical in the way that Fever Valkyries games tend to get physical when Caitlin Clark is involved. Clark is moving off screens, pulling up from the logo, operating at the pace she operates at when she's locked in. She finishes the night with 22 points, 9 assists, 4 of 9 from three-point range, and a logo dagger that lands directly in Tiffany Hayes' face at a moment in the game that quiets the Valkyries bench and sends Gainsbridge into a different gear entirely. It is, by any measure, a Caitlin Clark performance, the kind that makes national highlights, the kind that drives streaming numbers and social media posts, and the kinds of conversations that carry a league forward. And then it happens. Contact near the perimeter, bodies close together, and a hot mic catches Tiffany Hayes, a 12-year veteran of this league, telling Caitlin Clark to get her face out of hers. The broadcast bleeps the language, but bleeping something on live television in 2026 is essentially a flashing neon sign telling every viewer exactly what was said. The clip gets pulled, it gets posted, it trends. By the time the final buzzer sounds and Indiana has secured the 90-82 victory, the game result is already the second story. The hot mic exchange is the first. And here is where something extraordinary happens. Before a single person on the Indiana coaching staff makes a move, before the bench reacts, before there is any institutional response to what just happened on national television involving their franchise player, a forward named Maisha Hines-Allen is already on the floor. She's new to this team. She came over on a 1-year veteran deal in the offseason. She has been on this roster a matter of days, and she is already sprinting to the spot where Clark is standing, positioning herself physically between Clark and the situation, making her presence known in the way that teammates make their presence known when something has crossed a line. The coaches are still processing. The Fever organization has not yet formulated a response, and Maisha Hines-Allen has already drawn the line that nobody on the bench drew. The fans watching on television notice, the comment threads notice, and by Saturday morning, Indianapolis has already given Maisha Hines-Allen a nickname that the Fever organization itself has not come close to earning yet. They're calling her the bodyguard. One viewer put it as clearly as anyone could. Caitlin's bodyguard came sprinting out on the floor when that happened. She is always right there when Caitlin needs her. That comment had 57 likes before noon on Saturday, and the Fever organization, in that same window of time, had said nothing publicly about any of it. Not the hot mic, not the threat, not their star player's name in a sentence that included the words, "We've got her back." Nothing.
But the silence didn't start Friday. That's the part of this story that people are just beginning to put together. And once you see the full pattern, it becomes very difficult to explain it away as a coincidence. 3 nights. That's what's sitting between now and Chase Center. Thursday, May 28th, 10 o'clock Eastern, San Francisco, the Golden State Valkyries on their home floor with their home crowd, with Tiffany Hayes in her own building, with a viral moment still feeding every sports algorithm in the country. The Indiana Fever will walk into that arena carrying a win, a controversy, and a coaching situation that the entire WNBA world is now watching with far more scrutiny than it was watching 7 days ago. And Caitlin Clark will walk into Chase Center as she walks into every building, as the most recognizable name on the floor, as the player the cameras follow, as the reason the broadcast numbers look the way they look, as the player a 36-year-old veteran just threatened on live television without apparent consequence. Here is what 3 nights means. It means Hayes has 3 nights in her own city, with her own media, with her own fan base firing her up to let that Friday moment marinate into something bigger. It means the crowd at Chase Center will have 3 nights of sports radio, 3 nights of social media, 3 nights of hot takes and replays to work itself into the kind of energy that makes road games genuinely dangerous for visiting stars. It means the officials will arrive at Chase Center having seen the foul count that's been circulating on social media since Saturday, a stat sheet that reportedly shows Clark drawing 5 personals, a flagrant, and a technical on Friday, while Hayes drew 3. Whether that number is completely accurate or not, it is the number being shared, and it is the number that shapes the narrative every official walking into Chase Center will have seen. 3 nights is enough time for all of that to calcify into a genuinely hostile environment. And the head coach of the player walking into that environment has not said her name out loud in a defensive context since this story broke. That's not an accident. That's a choice. And understanding why that choice keeps getting made requires going back further than Friday. Pull up Stephanie White's post-game remarks from May 22nd. Listen carefully to the full press conference, not just the clips. She praises Taysha Harris, who started her first game in a Fever uniform and finished with 7 assists in 29 minutes. She talks about the defensive adjustments in the 3rd quarter, the higher pickup points, the corner traps that forced 22 Valkyries turnovers in the 2nd half. She talks about Aaliyah Bastian's 20 points and 16 rebounds, a performance that in any other context would have been the dominant storyline of the night. She talks about the bench, she talks about execution, she talks about effort and identity, and the things that coaches talk about when they want to sound thorough at a podium. And then a reporter asks specifically about Caitlin Clark, about the 22 points, about the 9 assists, about the logo 3, about the performance that, on a night with a hot mic incident and a viral controversy attached to it, was still a headline-worthy basketball display. And Stephanie White does something that every person who covers this team has now noticed and is now writing about. She pivots. She talks about the team. She talks about the offensive flow. She talks about the collective effort and the way the group competed. She says things that are technically accurate and athletically coherent and completely miss the point of what every single person in that room was actually asking about. You don't accidentally pivot away from your star player's name 3 times in the same press conference at the same podium in response to 3 different questions about the same player. You don't accidentally find the team angle, the flow angle, the collective effort angle every single time a reporter circles back to the person whose face was used as a target on national television 4 hours ago. That pivot is practiced, or if it isn't practiced, it is instinctive. And either version of that tells you something important about where Caitlin Clark stands in the internal dynamics of this coaching staff. Because here is the thing about post-game podiums. They are one of the most controlled environments in professional sports. A head coach at a post-game presser is not caught off guard. They are not processing information in real time. They have had the walk from the bench to the podium, however many minutes that is, to decide exactly what they are going to say and what they are not going to say. When Stephanie White arrived at that podium on Friday night, she had already made a decision about Caitlin Clark's name, and the decision she made was to leave it out.
But Friday wasn't the beginning. Go back to May 15th. Caitlin Clark versus the Washington Mystics. Clark finishes with 32 points. She hits 5 three-pointers in the 4th quarter alone. 5 in a single quarter, when the game is on the line and the defense knows exactly what's coming and cannot stop it anyway. And she drains a buzzer beater to tie the game. The kind of moment that makes highlight packages and airs on SportsCenter and gets shared by accounts that don't even follow the WNBA. It is a performance that demands a specific kind of acknowledgement from a head coach at a post-game podium. It demands, at minimum, a sentence, a complete sentence with Caitlin Clark's name in it, describing what she just watched her do. Stephanie White at the podium afterward asked about Clark and the pivot, team effort, the way the group competed together, the collective. May 15th, first game of the pattern. Then May 20th, the Portland game that became national news for a reason nobody anticipated. Caitlin Clark is scratched from the lineup 90 minutes before tip-off. The reason given is a back injury. But here's the detail that started conversations. That back injury was not on the injury report filed on Tuesday. It appeared 90 minutes before the game, with no prior indication, with no buildup in the public record, and with a timeline that raised questions nobody in the Fever organization seemed eager to answer. Reporters ask Stephanie White about it at the postgame. They ask about Clark's status, about the injury, about what happened in the 90-minute window between the report and tip-off. And Stephanie White's response, her full, complete, on-the-record response to questions about her franchise player's health and unexplained absence, was 4 words. "I'm not a doctor." 4 words, on the record, about the player her franchise is built around. May 20th, second game of the pattern. And then May 22nd, Friday, the hot mic, the silence, third game of the pattern. 3 games, 3 pressers, 3 pivots, the same coach at the same podium, and the same name missing every single time. When you line those 3 data points up together, you're no longer looking at a coach who's having a bad week at the podium. You're looking at something that appears to be deliberate, something that has a shape and a direction and a consistency that doesn't come from accident. It comes from a decision that was made at some point about how Caitlin Clark's name gets handled in public-facing media situations. And whoever made that decision, whether it was White herself, whether it came from somewhere else in the organization, whether it reflects something happening internally that hasn't surfaced publicly yet, that decision is now a story, because it's being noticed by everyone except, apparently, the people making it. Now let's talk about the person who actually showed up Friday night, because the story of Maisha Hines-Allen is in a strange way the most telling part of all of this. She is not a household name. She came to Indiana on a 1-year veteran minimum deal in the offseason, the kind of contract that doesn't generate headlines and doesn't come with a press conference. She has been on this roster for a matter of days in competitive game situations. She does not have a long history with Caitlin Clark. She did not go through training camp, building the kind of trust that veteran teammates develop over months and seasons.
She arrived, she learned the system, and she started playing basketball. That's the entirety of what she had when Friday night arrived. And when the contact near the perimeter happened, when Hayes made her move and the hot mic caught what it caught, when the situation began to escalate in the way that situations escalate when a 12-year veteran decides she's going to make a point on national television, Maisha Hines-Allen was already moving. Not after a signal from the bench, not after a timeout was called and a coach drew something up, not after someone in a position of institutional authority decided it was time to respond. She was already in motion. She read the situation and she made a decision, and she put herself between Caitlin Clark and whatever was coming next, and she did it faster than any coach moved. The fans saw it. The comment threads on YouTube, the posts on social media, the people watching on their phones and their televisions and their laptops across the country, they saw exactly what happened, and they responded to it with the kind of language that fans use when something genuinely moves them. They called her the bodyguard, not a defender, not a veteran presence, the bodyguard. That specific word chosen organically by people who were watching in real time and wanted to describe exactly what they were seeing.
And what they were seeing was this: the protective duty that should have come from the coaching staff, the protective energy that should have been established institutionally before the game even started, the public backing that should have been delivered at a podium. None of that had happened. The bench had not drawn that line. The organization had not said those words. The head coach had not used her platform to make clear that threatening Caitlin Clark comes with a response from Indiana. And into that vacuum stepped a player who had been on the team for days. And the fans gave her a nickname, because in the absence of institutional protection, a new veteran on a one-year deal was the one doing the protecting, and everyone watching could see it. That contrast between what Maisha Hines-Allen did on the floor in real time and what Stephanie White has done at the podium across 3 press conferences is the heart of this story. One person sprinted toward the situation. One person has spent 3 media windows sprinting away from it. And the person who sprinted toward it doesn't even have a long-term contract. Now here's where Friday's story gets considerably more complicated. The hot mic exchange was the headline. What reportedly happened in the hours after the game is what turned the story from a sports controversy into something that the league itself is now being asked to address. According to reporting from Outkick, AOL, and the WFMD regional affiliate, 3 separate outlets carrying the same underlying reporting, Tiffany Hayes was active on social media in the hours following the game. Active in a specific way. A fan, referencing the hot mic exchange, wrote that they had been ready to support Hayes' quote, crash out. That phrase, crash out, is contemporary slang that implies support for a physical confrontation. It is not subtle. It is not ambiguous. It is a fan telling a professional athlete that they had her back if she wanted to take things further with another player. And Hayes, according to this reporting, engaged with that post. Outkick noted carefully that the fan in question did not explicitly name Caitlin Clark in the post, and that the framing of Hayes co-signing the threat is interpretive rather than a direct established fact. That distinction matters, and it is worth being clear about. This is reported, not confirmed. This is what 3 outlets are saying happened, not what a league investigation has concluded. But the reporting exists. It is being widely shared. And in that same 36-hour window, Hayes also reportedly posted something else. She wrote, and this is being cited across multiple outlets, "My growth is a gift and a curse, but mostly a gift." That post, in the context of Friday night, generated its own wave of interpretation. Outkick reached out to the WNBA, asking whether the league plans to review the situation. The league, as of Tuesday morning, has not provided a public response to that inquiry. And the head coach of the player at the center of all of this, who has been in front of microphones across multiple media windows since Friday night, has not said one public word about any of it.
Not about the reported social media activity, not about the crash-out framing, not about the league inquiry, not about her player's name in a sentence that begins with the words, "We are going to protect her." The silence has been total, and it has been consistent, and it has now lasted long enough to become a story entirely separate from the hot mic moment that started it. Because here's the thing about silence in moments like this. Silence is not neutral. Silence is not the absence of a statement. In the context of a head coach who has had multiple media windows, who has stood at multiple podiums, who has answered multiple questions about multiple topics, silence about one specific thing is a choice. And choices communicate. This silence is communicating something, and the people paying attention to this story are receiving the communication loud and clear. Which brings us to the part of this story that makes all of it considerably harder to excuse. Because Stephanie White is not a coach who doesn't understand what protecting a franchise player looks like. She is not someone who has never seen it done. She is, in fact, one of the people who helped write the manual on it. Kelly Crosco hired Stephanie White on November 1st, 2024. Amber Cox was already in place as Chief Operating Officer. The hire was specific and intentional. The Indiana Fever were building around Caitlin Clark, and they needed a coach who understood what that responsibility looked like, not just tactically, not just in terms of drawing plays and managing rotations, but in terms of the full weight of managing a generational talent in a market and a moment that comes with extraordinary pressure from every direction. The hire was supposed to answer a specific question. Who do you trust to stand between your most important player and everything coming at her? And the answer Indianapolis gave was Stephanie White.
Here is why that answer made sense in November of 2024. Stephanie White was Tamika Catchings' teammate from 2001 to 2004. She played alongside one of the most decorated players in WNBA history during the years when Catchings was establishing herself as the standard for what a franchise cornerstone looks like. And then, in 2015, Stephanie White became Tamika Catchings' head coach. She was there for the final chapter of Catchings' career, managing the delicate and difficult balance of protecting an aging legend while keeping the team competitive. And she did not do it by accident. She did it with a protocol. In 2015, the Fever, under Stephanie White, implemented what became a widely discussed approach to managing Catchings at the end of her career. They capped her at 26 minutes a game, a hard limit designed to protect her body across a full season. They publicly framed a back injury as nagging, keeping the language soft and non-alarming, protecting both Catchings' mystique and the team's competitive standing. And at every press conference, across every media window, Stephanie White stood at the podium and defended Tamika Catchings. She said her name, she talked about her role, she made clear repeatedly and publicly that the Indiana Fever protected their most important player as a matter of institutional identity. That was not a strategy someone invented on the fly. That was Stephanie White doing exactly what a head coach is supposed to do when the franchise star needs backing. She ran that protocol. She knows what it looks like when a head coach defends a franchise cornerstone. She knows what it sounds like when a coach uses a podium to draw a line between their star and the pressure coming from outside. She helped invent the version of that approach that the Fever used in 2015. And on May 22nd of 2026, with a hot mic threat still playing on a loop across every sports network in America, with a veteran player reportedly engaging with fan posts about physically confronting her player, with 3 nights until Chase Center and a hostile road environment building by the hour, the coach who once wrote that playbook chose not to run it. That is the detail that changes this from a story about one bad press conference into a story about something more deliberate and more significant. Because you cannot know what you know and do what she has done and call it an oversight. You cannot have managed Tamika Catchings through her final season, cannot have stood at that podium week after week and publicly defended the most important player on your roster, cannot have built a professional reputation specifically around knowing how to handle generational talent, and then look at Caitlin Clark's situation and genuinely not know what the right call is. The right call is obvious. It was obvious in 2015. It is obvious in 2026. And the coach who made it correctly 11 years ago is the same coach making it incorrectly right now. Thursday, May 28th, 10 a.m. Eastern, Chase Center, San Francisco. The Golden State Valkyries will be ready. They will have spent 3 nights in their own city, sleeping in their own beds, eating their own food, reading their own sports media, hearing their own radio talk about Friday night and the hot mic and the foul count and the fever coming west. Tiffany Hayes will be ready in a way that players are ready when they feel like they got away with something, and the crowd has their back, and the moment is theirs to own. The Chase Center crowd will be ready in the way that San Francisco sports crowds are ready when a visiting team has handed them a storyline. They will be loud and they will be pointed, and they will direct every bit of that energy at one specific player in a road uniform. The officials will arrive at Chase Center having seen, whether they engaged with it consciously or not, the foul count that has been circulating on social media since Saturday morning. That count, from the stat sheet making rounds online, reportedly shows Caitlin Clark drawing 5 personals, a flagrant and a technical on Friday, while Tiffany Hayes drew 3. If that number is accurate, it is a foul disparity that demands explanation. If it is not fully accurate, the fact that it is being shared as though it is accurate means the narrative is already set. Either way, the officials walking into Chase Center on Thursday night are walking into a specific kind of scrutiny, the kind that can affect decisions in real time on the floor.
Caitlin Clark will be ready. She is always ready. That is not a point of debate. At 24 years old, having navigated 2 seasons of physical play, controversial moments, viral incidents, and the weight of being the most talked about player in the league, she has demonstrated a consistent ability to walk into hostile environments and perform at the level she performs at. She will have her back, literally. The injury that scratched her from the Portland game will be a factor the Fever training staff manages carefully heading into Thursday. She will have Maisha Hines-Allen next to her, the player who has already demonstrated what kind of teammate she is going to be in situations that require more than basketball. She will have the fans who are watching across the country and who have already made clear through comment threads and social media posts and YouTube comment sections that they are paying attention and they are on her side. What Caitlin Clark will not have, what she has not had across 3 games and 3 press conferences and a weekend of national news coverage, is the public, on-the-record, out-loud backing of her head coach. She will walk into Chase Center having heard across the most contentious stretch of her young WNBA career essentially nothing from the bench in her defense. No statement, no sentence, no press conference moment where Stephanie White looked at a camera and said Caitlin Clark's name in a context that made clear the Indiana Fever protect their own. And here is what that costs. Not just in terms of optics, not just in terms of the way this story is being covered, but in practical terms on a basketball floor. The message a head coach sends through public silence is received by everyone, by opponents, by officials, by the crowd in an opposing arena, by the player herself. When a head coach consistently declines to defend a star in public, the implicit message is that the star is navigating her situation alone, that she is not backed institutionally, that coming after her carries no organizational consequence. In a road environment as hostile as Chase Center on Thursday night, with a crowd that has spent 3 nights working itself into that energy, with a player across the floor who has reportedly been engaging with fans about crashing out, the absence of public institutional backing is not a small thing. It is the thing that sets the temperature for how far situations are allowed to escalate. Stephanie White knows this. She has known it since 2015 at minimum. And the question Indianapolis is sitting with right now, the question that is sitting specifically in the gap between what White did in 2015 and what she has done in 2026, is why. Why, with the playbook she wrote, with the experience she has, with the platform she has had across multiple media windows, has the sentence not been said?
Why has Caitlin Clark's name not appeared in a defensive context from the bench? What is happening inside the Indiana Fever organization that is producing this specific and consistent pattern of public silence from a coach who demonstrably knows better? Those questions do not have clean public answers yet. What the reporting shows, what the press conference transcripts show, what the comment threads and social media posts and YouTube comment sections are all pointing toward is a situation that has moved beyond a single bad game or a single bad press conference. It is a pattern, it has a shape, and the shape of it points in a direction that is not flattering for the bench, for the organization, and for the way Indianapolis is managing the most important player in its franchise history. 3 nights, that is what is left before Chase Center. 3 nights for Tiffany Hayes to sit in her own city and absorb the energy of a fan base that saw what she did on Friday and is ready to do it again, louder and at home. 3 nights for the Fever organization to decide whether the pattern of the last 3 press conferences is the pattern they want to take into one of the most hostile road environments Caitlin Clark has faced. 3 nights for Stephanie White to decide whether the playbook she wrote in 2015 is one she is willing to run in 2026. Indianapolis has watched Maisha Hines-Allen draw the line on the floor that the coaching staff has not drawn at the podium. Indianapolis has watched 3 games worth of press conferences where the franchise star's name has been treated like something to work around rather than something to defend. Indianapolis has watched a league controversy build over a weekend without a single public word from the bench about the player at the center of it, and Indianapolis has 3 nights before Chase Center to see whether any of that changes.
The people watching this story, the fans in the YouTube comment threads, the reporters who have been to 3 straight Fever pressers, the analysts working through the foul counts and the post-game remarks and the social media activity all add up to. They are all watching for the same thing. 1 sentence. That's all it would take to change the shape of this story going into Thursday night. 1 sentence from Stephanie White, in front of a camera, on the record, with Caitlin Clark's name in it, in a context that makes clear that the Indiana Fever stand behind their player. 1 sentence that draws the line the franchise has not yet drawn publicly. 3 nights out, that sentence still hasn't been said. Maisha Hines-Allen has already said everything she needed to say with her feet. The fans watching on YouTube have already said what they needed to say with 57 likes on a comment about a bodyguard. The reporters have said what they needed to say through 3 straight press conferences of questions that keep circling back to the same name. The story has said everything it needs to say through 3 games of a pattern that doesn't look like accident. The only voice that hasn't been heard yet is the one voice in Indianapolis that carries the institutional weight to actually matter on Thursday night at Chase Center. And with 3 nights on the clock, the head coach of the Indiana Fever has time to decide what kind of coach she is going to be for the player this franchise built everything around. Time to decide whether the 2015 version of Stephanie White, the one who stood at a podium and defended her star week after week as a matter of professional identity, is the version that shows up for Caitlin Clark, or whether the version Indianapolis has seen across the last 3 press conferences is the one that walks into Chase Center on Thursday night, and whether Caitlin Clark, at 24 years old, in one of the most hostile road environments of her career, walks in backed by her bench or walks in alone. 3 nights, 1 sentence. The microphone is still on.